Good evening. Welcome in daily UPSC editorial audio program. Absurdity called UNSC Times of India. Now pitch to make our UNSC bid. The Economic Times. Limits and border. The Hindu. Now the full editorial. Absurdity called UNSC. Times of India editorial. Musk is right. India deserves a permanent seat. 80-year-old UN needs to reboot. But can anything make it effective? We have said it for decades, but it might get a lot more pop play now that Elon Musk has said it. That it is absurd how India doesn't have a permanent Security Council seat. This absurdity has obviously become starker since we become the world's most populous country. UNSC's structure with five wielding permanent member is completely out of touch with today's geopolitical realities. Old World Order UN was born after World War II and continues to represent global power structures from 80 years ago. UK, for example, is a shadow of its former self. Its permanent UNSC seat will be a further absurdity if Scotland secretes, or look at Russia, which replaced Soviet Union in UNSC. Some say illegally. It is hardly a global security guarantor today. France barely registers, while US has undertaken many unilateral military actions outside UN purview. Geo- Geographical biases. It's also glaring that Africa doesn't have permanent UNSC representations, neither does South America. Meanwhile, Europe's largest economy, Germany, remains outside, so does world's third largest economy, Japan. Effect, Effective body permanent members have repeatedly used their veto for selfish interest, like US did recently on a new near unanimous resolution on Israel-Hamas war. China is the biggest obstacle to India's permanent membership, and Russia can't even unfreeze $300 billion in its central bank assets. UNSC hasn't made one bit of difference in halting Ukraine and Gaza war. India's path world today is far more multipolar than 80 years ago, and India's growing importance is acknowledged by platforms such as G20, India Pacific Quad, I2U2, and others. Therefore, permanent UNSC membership may not mean much for New Delhi. Plus, India will in a few years become a 5 trillion economy. When this trajectory takes it to an 8 or 10 trillion economy, it will be unignorable. New pitch to make our UNSC bid. The Economic Times. Earlier this week, UNSC Secretary General Antonio Guterres asked on X why Africa lacks a single permanent member in the Security Council, to which venture capitalist Michael Eisenberg replied by asking about India. In once Elon Musk followed Eisenberg, saying it is absurd that India is still not a permanent UNSC member despite being the most populous country. We realized that what we were seeing was a new crop. This time of supranational non-state actors, wealth creators asking the all too valid questions, and this questioning of India's outliner status could well be a critical driver that strengthens its claim for the seat. Over the next decades, India's rising hunger for energy, material resource, goods and services will shape global demand and influence response to existential challenges. This power, a function among others of its large population, will drive India's UNSC bid. Most developed countries support India's cause. This will solidify as the world gravitates towards loose bipolarity. Russia-China friendship and US-EU Japan combine India's commitment to the principle and practice of democracy and maintaining open societies should further buttress this support. But with great power comes with great responsibility, and this is where India needs to up its game. The propensity to play up its status as a developing country hasn't helped, making it difficult for New Delhi to rally the developing world, particularly the UN, where the G77 and China are key negotiating groups. To gain the UNSC seat. India must take on global responsibility, its capacity to engage meaning and for mutual benefit with G77 as well as G7 is its strength. New Delhi must leverage it with long-term foreign policy goals and straight strategic vision. Limit limits and borders. The Hindu center must consult states before making decisions that impinge on their powers. Litigation concerning the territorial jurisdiction on the border security force is Punjab seems to be the result of the lack of effective consultation between the central and state governments on the issue. Punjab has filed a suit against the union government under Article 131 of the Constitution, challenging the decision to increase the operational jurisdictions of the BSF from 15 km to 50 km. The border state sees the center's move as a breach of federal principles and an encroachment into the law and order powers of the Punjab police. West Bengal has a similar view, and both states have got resolutions passed in their assemblies against the expansion. In this backdrop, the Supreme Court's decision to examine the questions that arise from the expansion of the BSF's area of operations acquires significance. In October 2021, the Center has issued a notification under the provisions of the BSF Act standardizing the area over which the BSF would have jurisdiction to operate in Punjab, West Bengal, and Assam. The distance was raised from within 15 kilometers from the border to 50 kilometer, while it was reduced to 80 kilometer to 50 kilometer in Gujarat. For Rajasthan, it was kept unchanged at 50 kilometer. The UN government said in their reply in the Rajya Sabha in December 2021 that the extension of the BSF jurisdiction will help it discharge its border patrol duty more effectively. While the Union government may have valid reasons for its move, it should not be seen as encroaching into the domain of state governments, by which have the constitutional responsibility to maintain public order and exercise police powers. The BSF mainly focuses on preventing transborder crimes, especially unauthorized entry into or exit from Indian territory. It does not have the power to investigate or prosecute offenders, but has to hand over those arrested and the contraband seized from them to the local police. In practice, BSF personally usually work in close coordination with the police, and mayor ought to be no clash of jurisdiction. It is possible to argue that the expanded jurisdiction merely authorized the BSF to conduct more searches and seizures, especially in cases in which the offenders manage to enter deep into the country's territory. However, it goes without saying that there ought to be a strong reason for the expansion of the jurisdiction of any central force. In this regard, the most relevant question among those framed by the Supreme Court are whether the center's notification encroaches upon the state government's domain and what factors ought to be taken into account while determining the local limit of areas adjoining the borders of India. Thank you.